and make sure that you all have the slide deck as well. Okay, so this was a warm-up. So we had there already some knowledge categories, which we use intuitionally daily, of course. Yeah, so you will see knowledge is actually quite a surprising configuration of terminologies and definitions. So let's have a little bit a look at what knowledge actually is. Let's go on a journey for discovering definitions. By the way, is everybody back? I should probably check that first. Okay, so there are some sums and yeah, perfect, Raf. Yeah, super. Okay, let's get started with the juicy part. What is actually knowledge? Oh yeah, and maybe as a backup. So I've kind of tried to break down as well the different learning packages that Siobhan has in packages and linked it to reading. I noticed Siobhan had just a long list of reading, which is fine, but I guess for you guys to proactively navigate this, I rather wanted to have this. And be brave, click into them. You will see they are often not a very big read. So you will see those three will kind of really give you the background for this workshop. And if you kind of want to explore further, they are interlinked. Yeah. Okay. So, but let's start. Why knowledge? Why is it such a hot chestnut? And I've brought you here. Well, at the time I thought that was hilarious, but it's actually not a funny story. So I brought you here from the UK a letter, a very eminent letter by Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth, actually. So she wrote to the leading UK economists. And by the way, in this society, it's not just UK economists. It was as well the global scholars. So actually the most prominent one is actually a Harvard professor. Yeah, so, and they got this letter from the Queen and they responded. Actually, this is the response. I should clarify that. Yeah, so that was basically this gremium of very famous economists writing back to Elizabeth in the UK, yeah, to Her Majesty. So in summary, the failure to foresee the timing, extent, and severity of this crisis and to head it off while it had many causes was principally a failure of the collective imagination of many bright people, both in this country and then, of course, you know, what you do in this gremium, you blame somebody else. Yeah, so this is good old sport. Yeah, not being too embarrassed by what went wrong. Yeah, so okay. So first of all, does anybody recognize what this may relate to? What happened 2008? Why would there be a letter from economists answering to Her Majesty the Queen in the public? What do you think happened?
Financial crisis?
Yes, very good. Yeah, actually that was the wrong response from me. Yeah, but you're right. It was just after the financial crash, yeah, in September 2008, yeah, and October, and then it really unraveled. And one of the key questions was, they have all these very fancy scientific, economic kind of monitoring facilities that do predictions, projections, yeah. And how did it come that none of those institutions or control functions actually flagged the danger up or alerted, you know, before the crash happened? So that was the question here, yeah, and it's a good one. How come we are so blind to something so impacting to all of us? Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah, so why didn't we know is a question. Yeah, so keep that in the back of your mind. This is a little bit cryptic at that point. Yeah, but this is just to show you the importance of the scale. Now, there's a more modern spin to this. What is one of our biggest potential crises? Well, let's do two. So there's a there's one obvious one, and then there's another obvious one. Yeah. So is there another thing like this at the moment? Are there any crises that we kind of seem to, well, talk about, but not do much about? Anybody? Any crisis? Actually, we have a lot of crises at the moment, right? So
Yeah, that's right. Depending
which one
where
do you
you're looking
mean?
at.
Yeah.
It could be, if you're looking at Afghanistan, it could be, you know, the war and the civil war and the flows of people from Afghanistan to countries like America or the UK. They're accepting refugees. But if you look at other countries, it could be climate change, it could be a lot of things. So I wasn't sure which ones you were referring to as in terms of crisis, or even the coronavirus.
So yeah, you have opted for geopolitical. Yeah. So that was Afghanistan crisis. This is a good example. And what happened there in a nutshell?
So in a nutshell, the US ended its longest war and withdrew all the troops, and the government of Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. And so they are imposing a lot of extreme policies. And so the governments of Western countries are, you know, rescuing people who served the Western, you know, the Western oriented government in Afghanistan. But I think the main crisis is with the people of Afghanistan who don't really have
humanitarian.
a way out. So yeah, it's gonna be a long, I guess, long battle for them.
Yeah, but do you think that was foreseeable, or was that a surprise that come as in its severity and extent as a surprise?
Well, personally, I don't think it was a surprise because they all knew how weak the Afghan government was. It was just a matter of time when the US would, you know, pull out their support. That's my take.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. So, okay, you're challenging that crisis a little bit. That kind of was foreseeable, yeah, but still the kind of depth was maybe not clear, and how strong the impact would be on refugees. Yeah, yeah, okay, super. That was one crisis. Yeah, and I have to admit, I hadn't even had that crisis in mind when I was talking about
Okay, I'm
that
sorry, I
crisis.
didn't know where
But
you were
no,
heading.
no, like no, no. Look, so Lynn, you were spot on. There's so many crises at the moment. It's really kind of a. But yeah. Anybody else, or Lynn, do you have another crisis in your mind? Okay, no crisis. This is good.
Yeah, probably the coronavirus. I don't know. It's one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
biggest crises in the entire world right now. Um, I would talk about also the like there's heaps of stuff. There's
No, no. So, Raf, when we go with a corona crisis, well, so is the extent and severity, was that kind of known, or was that like something that came as a surprise?
of course it was a surprise. I have probably if we knew about it, like it probably needed 20 years in advance to uh, know how to deal with it. We still don't know how to deal with it now, even after like
I think the scientists try to.
COP15. Yeah. Um. You can go, Lynn. Sorry.
No. You go and then I'll.
Yeah, and even like the world fails. I think the world fails to uh act properly to anything, even if it was foreseen. Just like global warming, for example. Global warming is foreseen, and we know it's happening, and we know it's there, and we know it's killing the world. But yet we I don't know, like we're not really doing much about it. And until this like serious thing happens in the world, and then we'll go like, oh shit, we messed up. So that's what happened with the coronavirus. I don't know if it was foreseen or not, but it was like the immediate effect of it that got the world to act well, they didn't really act properly, but yeah, to like come up with stuff straight away.
Mhm. Yeah, so okay, so this was a good example actually. Yeah, so coronavirus, although we came to a discovery, as you said, and still the real impact was, although described by our scientists, yeah, and I think this is probably where Lynn wants to expand. They kind of gave us very clear scenarios, but to actually comprehend this and let that sink in what that actually means and understand that that's a different game entirely. Yeah, but go on, Lynn. You had as well the kind of spin to the scientists, yeah?
No idea. I was just gonna say, I think the scientists or academics, they already predicted a global pandemic that was gonna happen. But yeah, of course, the scale and the severity of the coronavirus pandemic was not. Yeah, they didn't predict that it would be at such massive scale with with that level of severity. But yeah, I think
I also think that the media blew it up a bit more than it deserves.
what do
Like
you
probably
mean?
way a bit more than it deserves.
What do you mean? Like it's not that severe?
It is severe. I'm
This is
not saying it is
polarizing
probably
comments.
health severe, but when 0.01% of the people that get the virus die, it's like probably more possible to die in a car crash than to die from the virus itself, even if it spreads to the whole, like to everyone around. So, but yeah, exactly. I think extreme measures were taken in regards to this virus. Extreme measures keep being taken, and it's gonna affect like literally the economy, the world's economy for years and years to come. We don't really see it now, but it's gonna be there and it's gonna affect us for like 20, 50 years at least.
Yeah, rough, just to backpedal maybe. So a promille from millions of people is a lot of people. So you have to be very careful. And like if you really have a pandemic, and pandemic is actually not an endemic. So there are different definitions, right? It's recognizing it's a social problem. And I think the biggest concern, pragmatic, with countries that are full in COVID, that are kind of experience a whole population outbreak, they are rough with you. They think like, okay, it doesn't really matter who gets COVID, how many people need the hospital. So they're not
Yeah,
actually managing any more COVID. They're just managing their hospital capabilities or basically their capacities. And but it knocks on the overall health infrastructure that is there to even cope with that. So, and that is the biggest fear. And we see this in very advanced societies like Singapore that manage this relatively well. And then we see this in other places that don't have the same health infrastructure. And there it's catastrophic straight away. So, and it's as well semi-catastrophic in the very advanced infrastructure places. So, yeah. So, and that I think is a tricky one in terms of knowledge and understanding to comprehend. Yeah. Okay. And anything else to crisis? I didn't want to divert too much, but this is why knowledge is such yeah, why knowing is actually quite a tricky one. Yeah, so there are multiple facets to it, and the more we know, the more we refine as well, the more we understand the problem, right? But maybe some other observation to crisis. We had as well the global warming. That was actually the one that I pitched up front for, but I noticed that this was not a clean pitch. So what is the issue with the global warming? Why is that a crisis. So Ralph said we know about this already for a long time. Why are we not doing anything if we know there's an issue? It's straightforward, right? We in a group here, we propose now a project and solve it, right? Is that not the way forward?
I think, I don't know. I think humans consume too much fossil fuels, too much non-renewable energy that they can't just hold it and then change the world into a renewable energy consumer. That's that
Okay,
quick.
so as people, we burn too much stuff, and that causes creates more CO2 than is good for us. Actually, I have some friends in England, Oxford. They have an entire different theory. So they actually argue that the plants are getting back now on us. And that I don't know if you have read the book, The Swarm. That was another knowledge bit that really surprised me. So the idea is that plants are basically, flourishing from CO2, and so in a way, the CO2 surplus is actually, in the greater scheme, something that may diminish us as humans. So it's really bad for us. So we really want to do something against it. But it's ultimately the coming back of the plants and mushroom world. Anyway, but that's yeah. So there's like very detailed knowledge in a particular college in the middle of England, which is probably not too contributing in solving this or coming up with a good project. But yeah, another pocket of knowledge. So why have we not been able to act on this? So Raf had already some causes, right? And we can probably agree that there are some drivers, and some of the consequences are very extreme events. So more extreme weather events, or droughts, or actually the opposite, more extreme rainfalls, which drain maybe our basically fertile grounds out. Yeah, so there are all kinds of very practical implications. So why are we not doing anything against that?
Probably have to ask the world leaders, not us.
Okay, hierarchy. Yeah, so we recognize it's a kind of global problem. So our kind of designated or elders, leaders, and so on, they need to step up and kind of come together and do this. Yeah. Other perspectives?
Maybe
So,
people's mindset needs to be changed in order to adapt to the new situation and improve our lives. So maybe there isn't enough awareness regarding the issue, the seriousness of the matter, and yeah, that's what, like, we need to uh, market the issue in a larger scale, and initiate to change people's mindset.
yeah, very, very good. So while this is maybe agreed, with some leaders and scientific communities, this is not necessarily yet, well, before even agreed, arrived actually at the broader population. Yeah, so this is kind of still nearly exclusive knowledge, or the implications are not clear. So again, this is a broad agenda, not really understood how it impacts on households. And actually, you are spot on. So this is not even at the level where people can connect with this and understand how it impacts on them, or how they may impact on the actual phenomena that drives it. And yeah, in the media, it kind of pops up in floodings and things like that. So there are more extreme weather events, but if you compare that to the COVID crisis in terms of dominance and media, it's nowhere near there. So it's yeah, it's a problem. Yeah. Okay, that was a so I like already in the structures and how you think about this. This goes in a good direction. There is another issue though, and please examine. Who knows what that is? Which one is the longer one? Anybody? Any guesses? Do you know that one? Anybody from engineering?
The lower one is the longer one.
Which one is the longer one?
The below one.
Okay, so we have one answer there. Bottom one is a longer
I don't
one.
know, I think they're both the same, just opposite direction.
Ah, okay. So this is a rough. This is of course the answer I wanted. Why do you think they're the same?
Because it's basically two lines with two arrows in their heads and pointing at opposite ways. One pointing outwards and one pointing inwards. That's what I see.
Yes, and what was the phenomena called? Do you remember why this is tricking us to believe that one is longer than the other?
No, I don't really know.
Yeah, visual. Yeah, okay. But so basically, it's a visual phenomena that we normally learn either in school in physics, or engineering students learn this again, and architectural students, that by certain formations, the visual appearance may look longer than the other one, but they are the same. But then they have to be the same length. And this is learned knowledge. Yeah, but actually Archu and Jeff were correct. I have rigged it. I've actually made the one below longer. Yeah, and this is important because with our force structures, our learned constructs, we bring biases along. Yeah. So Raf was right. The phenomena, if they would have been the same length, yeah, this is misleading based on the arrows because we have difficulty kind of associating shape if it's framed or contextualized. And that's a real phenomena. But then there is, of course, a slightly, oh, why is it not working? Yeah, here's the evidence. So both Archu and Jeff were spot on. I've rigged this, yeah, and just wanted to see who remembers the conception that were taught in previous school. Now, this is the issue. This is actually happening at the moment. We had a lot of standards of what knowledge is, and we have thrown them overboard. Yeah, so previous they were quality, this is a car. Now we are redefining what a car is. And this is a problem. Yeah? That means we have introduced turbulence. Yeah, so that is another issue. Yeah, so when we think about knowledge, yeah, what is actually true or false? Yeah, okay, that was a little bit mind-bending as an example, but okay. So let's get started a little bit on the knowledge front. So we have already had that there are conceptions in how we are looking at knowledge. There's language, yeah, there's information, there are facts, and they kind of frame something. But why should we actually look at this? And particularly for project management, and this is a good question. So the issues are down to avoiding repetition mistakes, inefficiencies in projects, conflicting opinions on how to perform certain processes. Yeah? We get as well framed. So when we looked at crisis, there were different stances and perspectives that may make a crisis look very different depending on where you stand. Staff lacking data information when it's required. So maybe concepts, yeah, previous elements, and information being unavailable when required. So everybody knows this probably from projects. Just when you thought you have everything in place, you recognize that there's maybe a disconnect or the process hasn't been developed yet. And worst, people leave. Yeah, so you have just started a project and you're very excited, and then one of your team members tells you like, hey, I've accepted this new grant job, I'm off. Yeah, so then with that person goes as well your knowledge out of the door. Yeah, so those are kind of the problems, and I've done a few studies there, and we've kind of tried to investigate why that is. So in project management, we fight this in particular. So knowledge loss is often due to the temporality of the project. So this is the pacing that you employ, the uniqueness of how you draw people together. They may, if it's contracted in, they may come from different companies. They may be used to their own work rhythms. So you have more kind of emphasis on bringing people together to actually work together. And if it's contractual, they may come in to do something. So they may be very task focused, not so much in aligning the task to the overall project. Well, Keegan and Turner kind of said that actually, if you run projects, this is as well where you learn, where you kind of figure things out, yeah, that you probably don't want to relearn every time. Knowledge is as well embedded with a project, so making projects actually learning side, and as well the space where innovation and knowledge creation actually happens. And further, Ayers kind of noticed here as well that once employed the notion of comparing the price of learning or the price of ignorance is basically the hot chestnut. So if you don't do project knowledge management, then you basically have the price of ignorance. Yeah, so which can be a blessing on many levels too. Yeah, so we know as well a project gets handed over and then we can run away. Yeah, but this is a bad strategy. So all I'm saying, yeah, we have a temporary notion, but don't go for that one. It's a cheap shot otherwise. Yeah. Okay. So that was just a little bit fun to kind of get you out of this heavy thinking notion. And where I wanted to write now is a little bit the definitions. So I understand that I probably puzzled you a little bit here. So let's just be very broad about it. So knowledge is best thought of as a cluster of concepts, yeah? And there are many kind of categories that go around it. If you want a recent definition, so a paper that I wrote is a conceptual paper, won a prize. Yeah, so I got a prize for best conceptual paper at EarnUp. So this is here the video link, and there's a paper as well, which is from 2018, where I kind of discuss a little bit previous philosophical stances that become very relevant in projects. So this is a concept of process and experience. But okay, let's dive maybe more broadly into it. So knowledge is neither data or information, though in terms of reference, it's pretty close. And once you start looking very closely at it, yeah, so for example, through artifacts or objects that we use, boundary objects, yeah, that we use for communication with our team members, information is often just a tiny sense away from knowledge, yeah, because it manifests in our knowledge. But it's not the same. So very important here, data, information, and knowledge are not interchangeable concepts, although their degree may be very subtle, different. Now, more aggressively was kind of Russell Akov. He kind of came from the social cultural perspective and kind of pointed out that actually knowledge is not even the kind of premium notion wisdom is. Now, wisdom is located at the top of the hierarchy of types for people, yeah. So that is descending there. Well, so when you kind of break it down, this is descending from wisdom. There are understanding, knowledge, and information. So he kind of accounts the understanding into the wisdom category. And then at the bottom, you have kind of data. And each of these categories includes a fall below. So for example, there can be no wisdom without understanding and no understanding without knowledge. And notice here, I don't know why understanding is actually missing. So there should be another bar here of understanding. But quick question, can somebody help me? What is actually wisdom? Can we come up with a practical definition? I've just noticed I haven't written this down. Practical definition, anybody? Wisdom? Well, what is wisdom?
I guess, wisdom will be the combination of knowledge and experience, because knowledge you can learn, but with experience you may develop wisdom.
Yeah. This is very good. That brings us very close. So it's a combination, you're right, of applied knowledge that is understood, and where you have as well experience how it can go wrong. Yeah. So wisdom is not just knowing the right way, but you know as well why this is the right way, because you have as well discovered how it can go wrong in multiple ways. Yeah. And this is normally why wisdom is not just experience, it's a repeated experience of something. Yeah. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Yeah, so this was sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I had something to add to that. I think wisdom, like you said, of course, would be something you learn over from experience, or that comes gradually. But I think in terms of experience, it might not specifically be only theoretical. It can be in terms of practical as well. Like generally, we always say that you should listen to maybe your grandparents or people who are elder to you, because they come along with a lot of experience, and they know how things come along in the path. And since we are young, we might end up doing some mistake, or we might not know how to go about it. So it's always best advice to take advice or suggestions from them. So
So you have to. So wisdom isn't just like experience, as you kind of described. Yeah, and you noticed here, this doesn't come easy in the language. In our day-to-day language, we have to kind of then kind of do time definitions. Yeah, so came along a long time. Yeah, so you kind of described this very well. Yeah, and that is exactly what wisdom is. Yeah, and often we talk to our elders or grandparents, or as well senior people, that have been there for a long time, not really to get the solution. I mean, it helps if they give you a pointer, but it's normally as well to give you the kind of right motivation. Yeah. So you and that is probably particular when you go to grandparents, like, don't be hung up. This looks a little bit difficult. You just have to kind of commit to it, and keep going at it, and then you will get it. Yeah. So something like this is often the solution. Yeah. And if you look at if somebody would write that down to you in an email, yeah, well, if it's your grandparents, then it's maybe still authentic. But often those wisdom tips don't translate that easily. Yeah, so you need a context, you need kind of the right relationship, and you need to understand as well their relationship to this practice, so that you can actually kind of put it into position. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very good example. Other comments maybe? Can I ask why is data here at the bottom? Is this not heartbreaking? Yeah, coming from university, is it not all about data? Okay, no comment. Yeah. So
numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, data is just numbers. So if you have only numbers and no interpretation of the numbers, doesn't mean anything.
Yes, I think you need to analyze those data to transfer these data to informations.
And put the numbers in context in that analysis that Hansen just mentioned.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Yeah. So I actually Aklov probably would have seen here the numbers as just another language. Yeah, but you're right. So if I would translate this, data is about measuring, and we normally measure for something, which is the information. Yeah. So if you want to figure out if something fits through the door, yeah, then you can measure it elegantly with a ruler or with a unit for figuring out the width. but of course you can do that as well by verbally comparing to other items, yeah, where you kind of intuitionally know how wide or something is. Yeah, this is a bad example, but this gives you then an idea if it fits through the door. And then maybe the wisdom is if you really want that in this room in the first place. Yeah, so sorry, that was a very practical example here of my room. So but my working room here is a little bit tight, and we have decided to make this a wonderful table out of the stand-up paddleboard of my wife. So that was probably my bad call of not fitting something too big in a small room. But yeah, anyway. So the idea here is data makes only sense and in context of interpretation and understanding. So be it even mathematical, yeah, that we have like a refined analytical framework versus maybe just talking about something and understanding the context is the same. Yeah. But this is a Wittgenstein argument, so I won't go too much into this. But you have the right idea there already, right? And it comes quite intuitional because I think we all had the luxury of education, and that is a force structure. Yeah? So this is an important kind of precondition to actually thinking in those categories. Yeah. Okay. Oh, so that was quite good. There, by the way, with wisdom and knowledge, there is a idealism, and in German language and as well Hebrew or some languages, this will be very visible because grammatically this is kind of staged very clearly. So that there are really different categories as in how this is thought of. And actually Rashi gave a good example as well with ask your grandparents, that there's the oversight. Yeah, so there's as well implicit hierarchy there. Yeah, and that is something I actually researched in 2009. We went a little bit berserkers there. I worked with Chambers of Commerce. I was a skills advisor for project-based HR, and we wanted to figure out what goes actually into projects. Do you still develop kind of the right skills and knowledge areas in projects for example, the new product development innovation that the Northeast in England was famous for? Yeah, they were heavy into manufacturing and things like that. And what became very clear when we kind of surveyed the companies there, we arrived that actually 3/4 have a purely economic emphasis, and that was reinforced in policies and how people were recruited, and in projects, how you got promoted and how you got more pay. And the emphasis here was on competence. And competence is being able to do the job. Yeah. So, and if we are thinking of the project, that makes probably sense, right? Because we have interdisciplinary setups, different people coming with a skill set in to then perform a competent job on the project. Yeah. So it's professional. It's what the client is looking for. Yeah, we take our success, but it de-incentivizes wisdom because you have to be fast. You have to figure out how to work with your team members, and you have to be able to develop what you're doing in the project. Yeah. So emphasis towards competence, and then, but when we kind of spoke to the people, so the survey still showed that if you ask like, do you want to become a specialist, expert, there was still this drive towards wisdom, but there was a social cultural perspective, and that was to a lesser extent. So ironically, where we still found it was in music and arts. So in music and arts, there was still the drive towards absolute expertise. So for example, if you looked at grants and getting money for skill development, then if you were a very talented musician, for example, then there were actually a lot of grants for you to develop, to play alongside in very elite orchestras. And then there was another bubble that was as well skill and competence. So there was as well a lot of money for people to start playing music. Yeah, but there was nothing in the middle. So my point here is the economic perspective actually drives as well what legitimate knowledge is. So there's a implicit idealism with those concepts, and you too will inherit this in projects. Yeah? So this gives us a little bit an idea of what kind of emphasis is actually given on knowledge. Yeah? Oh yeah, and the legitimacy. So for wisdom, there were normally no grants. So normally the money and grants and policies stopped at the knowledge base, which kind of makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now that was background, let's come a little bit to the definitions. And I promised you here, we go a little bit wild with a philosophy, but there's a good reason for this. So I won't give you here the story of the fire in the cave and and how we know that we know and so on. But what I wanted to kind of come to, because this is a hot topic in the project management literature, is the different elements of knowledge. So basically there were kind of well, I guess here in this list it's 5 definitions. So when we come to the knowledge definition or ways of knowing, Aristotle kind of divided it into what we know, yeah, and then had the 3 definition, and how we know. So and they are very different kind of elements. So just to give you a feel for it, so the episteme, to understand facts and truths regarding something. So we need, again, our interpretation framework, yeah. So where we kind of have like our units of measure, which we can measure as facts. And then we can, yeah, I'm not too happy with the truth term, but that was in the journal article. So I will just accept it here. But yeah, so basically your kind of observations are kind of following with the factual observation as in what you were looking for. Yeah, and that is episteme. So do we have those in projects? Facts? I give you a controversial one and you tell me, is this episteme or something else? So, okay, your deadline for the work package was this day, that time, and you haven't submitted, so you are late. Is that a episteme? Is that factual truth? Anybody? Okay, that was a grim example for academic. Yeah, but yeah, so the quick question here is that a true statement, right? So we could probably say, yes, it's a true statement, but what is actually here the fact? What is the data?
Deadline?
Yeah, the deadline is information, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, you're on the right track. So what is the fact?
Schedule? Is it the schedule?
Oh, so but yeah, so the construct is a schedule, you're right, yeah. But so there is no fire. So the data point, is it there or is it not there? Yeah. That was the data. And then the information to actually contextualize it was there was a date when it was supposed to be there, right? That is the information level. And then we can analyze it. So that is then, is it there or not? Which allows us then it's not there. Yeah. So we have multiple level, and this is episteme, but that is nearly as well the next one. Yeah. So it's nearly the techne, because you are actually using here another level to make a statement of, well, in this case, so my implicit notion here is that something was supposed to be there, right? Okay, let's try the next one. So technique is to understand the tools and methods for doing something. Yeah, and that is, Archu, what you said. That would be the schedule. Yeah, the schedule we can use to create time pressure and to sequence something. So initially we can use it to synchronize and order stuff. Yeah, and then we can set expectations with it. Yeah. And actually the last part is already phronesis. But so simplified, the tool is a schedule, right? And it's for doing something. So it's kind of work that has to be done. And we are using this to kind of ordering it and to kind of sequence it, yeah? And the phronesis is then to the last one, to understand a rational value or a moral virtue. And that is to literally make the statement of the final outcome. So is this good, or is that is that generally the right direction? Yeah, are we progressing, or something like that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we may revisit this later. So at the moment, this is quite abstract, but before we can do so, we have to kind of jump as well a little bit into how we know. So there's a Sophia, to understand something through reasoning, judgment, or wisdom. And then there's a nous, to understand something through experience, instinct, or even discovery. Yeah, blank sheet, and you give it a go, and there you go. Yeah, so pre-discovery. Wait a minute, let's go one back. Well, actually, so maybe still, do you have at this point any question for this? Have you thought in those categories before? Can I check, has anybody come across the literature from Ben Fluberg, for example, about phronesis and mega projects?
Sorry, what was his name?
Ben Fluberg, or Daniel Kahneman is another famous one, but Daniel Kahneman is more in economics, whilst Ben Fluberg is more in our project management. Okay, I have one
Yeah,
comment.
I think he, I read some papers because Dewey did focus on mega projects in Duro's unit.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, so he did a paper on the causes and corrections for failures in mega projects.
Yeah, very good.
Came across that one.
And did you remember what the causes were?
Oh, he identified like 18 causes and 54 corrections or something, but I didn't read that paper on phronesis on in mega projects specifically. So
Okay. Yeah, so if you really look at that, the academics go in with different knowledge claims, and Ben Fluberg has reinvented from phronesis. Well, so it's an old philosophical tradition, and we have actually kind of cut it down. So in our scientific literature, we kind of focus on episteme and techne, and then maybe suggestive phronesis. But Ben Fluberg has actually brought back the phronesis, and he's not the only one. So there's a good reason for this. So as neuroscience and Daniel Kahneman, with his biases, has shown, is that we, in his famous book, Think Slow, Think Fast, he has kind of shown that most of our decisions are basically at the interplay of nous and Sophia. So the majority of the day of how we are using our mind is actually in this nous status. So we have kind of routines, we kind of cope without thinking too much about it. And then only if we have like a critical event or something where we kind of are instilled to start going into Sophia, into reasoning, analyzing, taking a moment to kind of check what's going on. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping again with my mouse. Why is that always happening? Yeah. So this is something that happens actually only a few times per day, and this has largely to do with our cognitive load. Yeah. So with how our brains are wired.
So probably
That
that's the answer to why we haven't acted on climate change.
Yeah, that's true. But having said that, so with projects, we are quite good, but the more global it is, the more difficult it is. So particular, so we, if you really analyze that field, you would be surprised how good some actors have been in reacting and corresponding systematically to sustainability, and how bad the majority of other actors have been in reacting to this. So yeah, there's maybe another hidden discovery there. But this brings me to the phronesis then, because that is Ben Fluberg's argument. So Ben Fluberg used Daniel Kahneman's argument of biases, and he kind of said, look, in mega projects, yeah, of course, there is optimum biases, which means we are here in the phronesis element. Yeah, so you claim you can do something, you use a tool, but all the tools are running on optimum. Yeah, so if everything goes according to plan and we have a little bit luck here, then we will deliver the project in time and in the budget for 1.3 billion. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of money, but then the problem is the scale and as well the resourcing and wonderful things like social politics and other elements come in and makes this actually a value call. And the reason here is with those projects, Ben Fluberg showed that if you're really in this episteme level, you wouldn't even make a value stance on the project. You would just say that actually those estimates have been repeatedly underestimating the risk, the scalability, and things like that. So by default, the scientific answer has to be they will always run between 150% to 300% over budget. Yeah, if we're just looking at the budget, and that would be the episteme level. But Ben Fluberg hasn't left it there because he is as well interested into local and regional and national governments and politics. He has said, like, no, we have to kind of call it that. We have to call it strategic misrepresentation. Now, what is implicit here? What value do you hear by strategic misrepresentation? If somebody says like, oh, you have strategically misrepresented that, how would you feel about this? Is this a nice statement?
It's like you so for example, at the beginning of the project, you just say, oh, it will just cost 1 billion just to make sure that it gets approved. But then at the end, it's like 13 billions. So yeah, that's not morally correct, I guess, thing to do.
Yeah, so is strategic misrepresentation a fair term? Do you think that this is, so what is the notion here? Is that factual knowledge, or is that the truth? Can we say epistemologically this is sound?
Do you mean the statement is true, or the representation, of course, is not true, right? It's false. It gives you the false impression, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. You have put that very politely. My friends in the Netherlands would say, liar, liar. Yeah. So and then of course then politics is out of the window. You have basically a shouting argument. Well, this is where politics, but you have basically lost common ground. Yeah. Then you put it very. This is not a fair representation. Yeah? This is normally what we say as academics as well. Yeah. So. But you're right. So the calculation in itself may be right. yeah, but the object of this estimate, yeah, as a device in the project is what Ben Fluberg criticizes as strategic misrepresentation. And Ben Fluberg works as well with these Dutch colleagues of mine, and they are a lot harsher than him. This is why Ben Fluberg is more popular than them, because they said that is just lying. Yeah, and Ben Fluberg had strategic misrepresentation. And everybody was like, yeah, in the business world, yeah, strategic misrepresentation, we can go with that. So this is where this was coming from. Yeah, but this is effectively phronesis. So you look at the overall contents, yeah, and you make as well that call as in how knowledge or objects that represent knowledge, yeah, make a knowledge claim, play actually out in the overall kind of claim, yeah. So do we still achieve that? Yeah, but then you have to ask a lot of questions to actually get there. But okay, so this is why this is actually an important point to get. But we have multiple iterations to kind of get our heads around this. Okay, and any other questions so far to this? Okay, I leave it with that then. Now, for our definitions, this is kind of, again, Davenport and Prusak. So this is one of the sword fathers that actually came up with what's now being termed knowledge management. So they kind of put it a little bit different. They kind of placed knowledge is a fluid mix of framed experience, values, contextual information, and expert insight that provides a framework for evaluating and incorporating new experiences and information. It originates and it's applied in the minds of knowers. So they see the unit where knowledge is in people. Yeah? In organizations, it often becomes embedded not only in the documents or repositories, but also organizational routines, processes, practice, and norms. What do they mean by that? I thought knowledge is in the people. Well, what does that mean? How can knowledge be in how we are doing something, or process, or practice, or norm? Anybody? Okay, I have a story time later and tell you a little bit about one of my favorite diaries for the wrong reasons. But yeah, that is something we can discuss a little bit more. Now, as a memory hook for knowledge, I would give you two. The first one is actually, I think, wrong. So as in the quote, I don't think Albert Einstein actually observed this way. I think this is more one of these attributed, marketed stuff. But still, it's a good hook to memorize what knowledge is. So knowledge is experience. Everything else is just information. And Heidegger kind of has this pretty much at the beginning of Being and Time. And he kind of says, if knowing is at all, it belongs solely to those entities which know. And Heidegger doesn't just think here of people. So he thinks here of as well of animals and the physical world as we experience it. So he is on an entire different trip. Yeah, and he gives the example of the tree that falls over the river, and nearly everything, including animals or humans, recognize it as a bridge to pass the river, and points out it's not just animals, it's even plants and everything else. So there's a kind of functionality and inertness that goes beyond what Padenhoff had in mind. Yeah, but okay, this is a memory hook. So if somebody asks you what is knowledge, this is a pretty good definition. By the way, this is different to our scientific knowledge. Yeah, so be aware that that is a different capital. And yeah, where are we time-wise? Okay, let's do a quick run into this and have a discussion around this. How do we know we know? and the dilemma of not knowing what you don't know. Now, I've thought about what a good example is, and I will do a painful thing. And it's painful for multiple reasons. It's because I experienced it as a child, as an emotional moment in my life. I got told, okay, does everybody know how to make a knot for shoelaces? Did everybody have this problem? Robert came prepared. He brought a shoe. Yeah. Okay. Does everybody know how to do this? Can you do thumbs up or okay? Yeah, we have one.
What was that? Sorry.
How to tie your shoes. Okay, we have 4 people. Now, okay, maybe in terms of background, I will just preempt this. As a 14-year-old, I thought as well I knew how to do a shoe knot. I had thought that I had acquired this knowledge where my parents probably told me with 2 or 3 how to knot a shoe knot. And then I had a very angry Swiss shoemaker who had a very heavy accent. And he told me like, no, you're doing it all wrong. And I was like, no, this is my shoe knot. So what had happened? Okay, I ask you, you can try it as a self-experiment. So how do you normally do this? Actually, this goes slightly, I hope it's not too bad. Can you see this? Okay. Oh, okay. Can you see this?
Yep.
Okay, so how do we do this normally? We kind of tie it like this, right? And be aware, this is videoed, so it's mirrored like this. And then we take the index finger, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Which way around?
I think it goes the right way.
Right. So here is my right. So here, like this, or like this.
It's difficult to tell, but we know how to do it, but it's difficult to tell how can you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we go normally south, and then something happens. You pull the shoe, and do you see it? The shoelace does a twist. It goes this way. Now this is what my Swiss shoemaker saw. No, you're doing it all wrong. It's a counter knot. And I have to admit, up to 14, I had never done it right. So the key is still the index finger, but you have to go around your thumb. You have to counter knot it. And then it's suddenly sitting like a counter knot. Okay, this may not look like much, but do you understand what that means? Our most profane knowledge was wrong. I was in tears and shock. Yeah, from there on, I never did my shoelaces wrong again. But I noticed this is not common practice, and I have been a bad communicator, so I have not shared this knowledge with a lot of people. But this is a dilemma. We don't even know that we don't know. Yeah, so do you see the drama here? Okay, I challenge you, try it out yourself. To that point, this kind of talk from him, I had done all my life basically shoelaces wrong, and I think all my friends and family too. So it's yeah. So try it out, check it out. It should be a counter knot, right? The laces should sit sideways nicely, yeah, square to your shoe, not upside, not like basically in parallel to your shoe. Yeah, that is where it's going wrong. Okay, then same issue. Have you tried it, or is it? Do you know?
No, yeah, I'll try it after, maybe in the break.
Yeah. So the thumb is I think normally you do it to the front, and the key is to do it to the back over the thumb, so that you go once one way and then the other. Then it's the counter knot. Okay. Okay, that was basically the dilemma. And yeah, so where does that knowledge sit, and how do we become aware of it? So how do we figure out what we don't know? And I've done again the classical thing. I'm jumping again. So one way to kind of categorize and think about knowledge is well, we had kind of the different knowledge type, right? We had the episte, we had the techne, we had the phronesis, and we had the Sophia, and we had the, oh, I've forgotten the last one.
No.
No. Yeah, news. Yeah, you're right. And we have, of course, as well, situational knowledge. So that is the one that in circumstances can come to the front, right? So how do we know it's limited to specific context and time? So what is situational knowledge? So what was the example that I had here? I wanted to tie it to my shoemaker, but this is too complicated now in my mind. So situated knowledge is something that we have very often in projects. We work interdisciplinary, and in the exchange, you work something out. So for example, this could be a simple question for how to set up your report, the template. Yeah, there are many ways of structuring a report. And then with your team member, you may decide to do it one way, and you agree it on the time. So there may be some particular perspectives that you kind of reason or rationalize, or you pull out a template that looks exactly like the marking rubric, and your team member is like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And this is okay, but this is often very difficult to repeat. So what is the issue here? If you have two people and they don't have the template, this is nearly impossible to repeat that way. Yeah. So you may discover a similar template. Yeah, but notice here, I kind of have to already go in additional language because it's not the same. Yeah. And this is problematic because this means as well, what we establish in one project may or may not be repeatable. So here, the focus is on the learner. So how can I now, from this one project, implement the learning in the other? So I look now at your report, I see the template, and I think like, yeah, this makes sense. And then because I have kind of discovered that, okay, they were smart, they had a look at the marking rubric and use that for their template, I can actually jump into an EMIC perspective. And the EMIC perspective is, as a learner, I can put myself into your shoes. Oh, why have I used the shoe analogy here? This is very confusing. So basically, I can jump into your perspective, yeah, and understand what knowledge and understanding you applied to make actually meaning of this, and probably even understand the values that were driving you. So you want to kind of hit the marking rubric, so that makes clear sense to me. Yeah, so I can actually follow you from an EMIC perspective as a learner. Yeah, and that is good. That is knowledge that is self-explanatory, that is clearly designed. Now the problem with that is, in a lot of knowledge, that is not the case. The more scientific you go, normally the more unintuitional it becomes. And that is the ethic perspective, wherein you seek to understand the knowledge in the light of the meaning and value it has for you at present. So the famous example from the textbooks is, should I go into the Newton example? Why is sun dot there rather than there? Yeah, so so you may come to a point in the ethic perspective that you are not able to quite understand why the template is this way, but you recognize that in your current situation, that template is actually well applied because it addresses, for example, the categories or marking rubrics, but you may not understand fully why it was constructed that way. Yeah, and here the ethic notion is you have difficulty to think through the eyes of the kind of architects or makers or creators or something like that. Yeah, but you can see the value and why it's a good strategy to maybe adopt this, yeah, or copy elements of it. Yeah, so that is a second notion of a learner perspective. Yeah, so ethic is kind of the outsider perspective, if you want, difficulty to kind of really look through the inside perspective, and EMIC perspective is the inside perspective. And yeah, so if you think of projects, we have actually a setup where this is often at play. Yeah. Any questions to that?
Yeah, Robert, just to clarify, do we adopt both perspectives most of the
Yeah,
time?
so as a learner, we probably try to always do that, but in some cases, it will be just too remote. You know, you won't necessarily have access to the meanings used or the values, which means it's super hard to actually comprehend in its remit. Yeah, so Lynn, I think those interpretations or the emic perspective and ethic perspective are always at play. You know, you probably just start by looking at something and you say like, oh yeah, that intuitionally makes sense. Oh, this is quite surprising. And then you look close at it and try to go for an emic perspective, but then recognize the ethic perspective as something that creates value. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, let's do that maybe in a few examples that we get a little bit more our head around those distinctions as well. Oh yeah, but before that, we have some other ones. So the other famous one from Polanyi, he's as well one of these thought forefathers. But by the way, amazing book, quite old, but still had a lot of foresight, so it's still very applicable. Polanyi kind of looked at knowledge and noticed that there's an explicit notion. This is what we can write down, what we can tell quite easily, what is applicable. And as long as you have a similar, not the same, yeah, so you don't have to have the same experience horizon, we can actually talk about it. Yeah, so and the famous chestnut here was a tree. Yeah, so if you're talking about a tree, we kind of know that tree has probably wood and other things. Or if we are talking about explicit project management plan, we probably associate some form of document that guides our organization and how we reason and who is doing what and so on. But if you then look at it a little bit closer, you will come very quickly to actually let's do that example. Explicit. When you think of a tree, can you name kind of features of what tree you see in your mind, or maybe through your window? And anybody up for giving an example? So what does a typical tree look like for you?
It's a green one. Just a yellow. Yeah, the color is green.
Green, yeah. And is the stem green too, or what is the color of the stem?
Brown.
Brown, yeah.
Oh, sorry, you were breaking up a little bit. What was the color? Yeah.
Brown.
Brown, yeah. And when you say green, is it what kind of green is it? Is it a bright green or more darkish green?
Bright green. I think it's a bright green.
Okay, so is everybody happy with this? So brown stem and bright green, is that the tree you're thinking of?
I would say dark green.
Dark green, okay, but brown stem?
Well, I'm looking at the lemon tree in my balcony. It's not brown. Stem is just dark green, darker green, I guess.
Dark green gray, yeah. Is it green or?
I think the brown is common, but the green really depends on the seasons.
Yeah, okay, depends as well on the season. Is that true?
Yeah. I think I have a different one here. I was a tree that came into my mind was the banyan tree, which has like really long roots, and back in my home country, we as kids we used to tie up the roots in the form that it looks like a swing, and like we can just swing around on those roots. So
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay, this is amazing. Okay, yeah. So you have even like so just to preempt in Germany or Switzerland, you can't do that on trees. Only if you have a kind of a swing hung around the branch, but that's an entire different game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we had seasons. Yeah, so it's not always green. It changes with the seasons. And actually, North Germany, Berlin, where I'm from, we have a lot of needle trees. Yeah, so we have as well this dark green, and it's quite disappointing. It doesn't really go brown unless something is wrong with the soil, and the tree's normally dying or drying out. But normally it's green all year. Yeah, so yeah, good. So we had here kind of a shared cognitive model of a tree, and we were probably all on board, but already with a stem. So the kind of very basic observation, Lynn kind of pointed out that her lemon tree, was a different color. So there was already the divergence, right? And that's quite remarkable, right? So we have the shared knowledge construct. And then once we go to the kind of sub-notions, we notice that it's actually diverging. And this is not the only thing, right? So it's probably with most items that we use in our language, right? And that's we can make that explicit. So it's maybe implicit, but we have to ask, and then we can declare it. Declarative knowledge or descriptive knowledge, but it's painful as well. Yeah, so you really need to know the function why you're doing this. Otherwise, we are probably not too keen to do that. Now, and you notice here, Polanyi actually kind of had only explicit and he had implicit, but he didn't actually go for the category. So the other one is tacit, and that is unarticulated. And oh, I'm jumping again. Okay, wait. This is because I wanted. So tacit is the unarticulated, rooted in experience and tied to the senses. So that is one of the interpretations of Polanyi. And this is often actually used wrongly. So I see this often in consultancies or management documents, that tacit is just the stuff that hasn't been written down yet. And actually in my recent research project, I nearly fell off the chair. There was a project manager that told me proudly that they hadn't mapped out how they're programming on a very fast construction site, that was his tacit knowledge. And then he pulled out a hand drawing. How he's doing this. This is, of course, as well explicit. It's just his personal hand drawing. Yeah, it's still explicit knowledge. So there was nothing tacit about it. It's just that he's hiding it and not sharing with anybody. Yeah, that's a different game. Yeah, so just to be clear, tacit really means you can't make it explicit. Yeah, so it's but by the way, be aware this is referring in Polanyi's mind to how we think and how we make sense with language and our kind of conceptions. Polanyi wasn't yet aware that we have super sophisticated face recognition that recognizes, pattern forms that can actually now make things explicit that we in our previous language games would not even touch on. Yeah, so but here recognizing again the languages that you earlier mentioned, mathematics. So mathematics combined with coding and wonderful programming languages can actually add to our vocabulary, but it's again a new language, right? So you have to be careful with the IT people and mathematicians. Yeah, so they just talk programming. Yeah, so actually, anybody here from IT? we normally recognize this as well in languages, right? Do you speak Python, or do you speak more Turbo Pascal? No, Turbo Pascal is my time. Yeah, so no one speaks Turbo Pascal anymore. Yeah, but it's programming languages. Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. Linda and Wald had this actually in mind, particular with another element. So just to preempt it, there in the larger literature, so as well when you go into really famous pieces on this, so knowledge kind of formal, informal, and explicit, implicit, tacit, and intuitive. So intuitive knowledge is as well something that we kind of recognize in forms as in ready to hand, and this goes even as far as instinctive patterns that we recognize, yeah, or that we expect. And there are some weird language games that you can play. What color is a fridge? Does anybody know this game? Intuitively, what color is a fridge? I take answers. This is always when I do this in a student class where one student gives me the red color. I don't know why this is. So what is a typical fridge color?
Gray or
White.
silver?
Silver, I don't know.
Silver? Okay, there was white. Let's go with white because this is a dominant pattern. And now the question, who answered this?
Right, I said white.
Okay, Raf, super, you are my candidate. So Raf, fridge, white. What does a cow drink?
Water.
Well done, well done. That was not thinking fast. Yeah, but
No, I'm not.
so
I'm
if
not,
you played that trick,
I'm not
yeah,
gonna say milk.
yeah, milk is normally the typical answer, and it's to do with our intuition. So you have a framing here when you think about food and drink, yeah, and right, Raf. So well done. There was an analytical effort. Or did you know the game?
Yeah. I've heard it before. Usually ask what's the color of the wall, what's the I don't know, what's your Lynn's shirt look like? What's the color of Lynn's shirt? And you ask a couple of questions that the answer is white, and then you ask what does the cow drink, and most people say milk.
Yeah, and this is really triggering. So it's yeah, basically a form of language games, but intuitively for us, drinking sits together with milk. Yeah, so this is how we have as well internal value associated, and that works nearly in most cultures that have language games. Yeah, so all, yeah, more or less. So it's actually quite surprising. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, so that was another one. Now, you noticed already there is a difficulty with knowledge, of course, if this is that hard. And by the way, this is I make here huge assumptions. I assume you had sense making and you had meaning making. Did you do that with projects as social systems?
Yeah. We talked about meaning making. You mean a sense giving, or I don't know.
Yeah. So that is the right answer. So you had sense making and active listening, and did you do rich pictures with systems drawings?
Rich picture
Open.
backgrounds, yeah.
Okay. Did you do the Sigi model?
We did this
one?
with grow in 4,000. Some of us.
Yeah. So that was exactly my question. Who has done this before? Are you all familiar with this?
I've seen it before.
Okay, 2 people. Okay, I will just mention it because this is something that we will have repeatedly coming up as well when we work through the case studies. So the Sigi model is one of the still probably best models that really works, how you can kind of come to a near knowledge exchange. And the idea here is by the way, it's not just going once through it, it's repeatedly to really learn something or have a deep insight. And this is largely tested kind of in science and kind of knowledge intensive jobs. But yeah, the notion was kind of the socialization, right, as a driving element. So if you don't know something, you socialize. That is tacit to tacit. You look at the situation together, creating knowledge through experience, walking around the inside of the company, or you have a look and how it was put together and witness kind of what the different steps were. And yeah, so the key here is really on the element of accumulating tacit elements. So it's about observing, taking in. Then you try to externalize this. You are, so this is important, you externalize it to the person that knows already. Yeah, and this is to do with articulation, dialogue, and reflection. So you kind of need to recognize that as well as a knowledge exchange, if you want. Yeah, so as to asking the person if that is what actually happened. And then there is a combination. So you want to kind of have explicit to explicit. So you want to internalize as well the language from the other person to reiterate your observations, or maybe prompt as well if you missed observations. You know, what are we actually trying to observe? Yeah, or what are we looking for? And then there was the internalization. This is then trying to maybe do or reconstruct it yourself and looking for the right steps to actually being able to reproduce the known. Okay, and this is multiple iterations if you want to be successful. But this is still to today one of the most successful definitions. And as well, in engineering, for example, in my building 4.0, where we try to automate certain processes. So for example, a crane pathfinding, yeah, one of my PhD students fights around with this. We literally do that. So we film it, we go back, we kind of confront the plant operator, the crane operator. Then we ask as well the engineers that normally plan complicated crane lifts and things like that, would you do it this way? And then we show them our algorithms. And we do this multiple times before we even think about piloting the automation. Yeah? And then, yeah, in this case, it seems to work. Yeah, so we can actually automate crane path lifting algorithm that predicts projection where you should lift your crane, which means we can automate it eventually. Yeah, and that has happened before in other more standardized environments. So yeah, okay, but that was an example. Yeah, and Karen's and Fruwell's paper is a little bit more art evoque. So Nonaka and Takushi, there was quite thin, so they have a little bit more examples, so it was an easier read. This is why I kind of put it in as a reference. Okay, story time. So actually, do we have, where are we time-wise? Okay, I give you a quick story. So because we are in the project space, we have to, of course, ask as well, why is this so essential? So we had now knowledge definitions. We understand it impacts on norms and processes. And as managers, why do we learn about this? Should we not just leave that as objects of truth around us and interpret them? Why is there suddenly, why is Robert introducing techne and phronesis to us? What is that all about? Any ideas? Okay, now I will preempt it. So it's of course because you are the active shapers of these knowledge objects and artifacts, and you are as well one of the people steering what legitimate knowledge is. And now to my story time, and I encourage you, by the way, this is all available online. If you want, I put the link as well in the Moodle site. If you want to learn how that was used for manipulation in one of the most famous endeavors in probably Western history more than anywhere else, then you should read the diaries too. It's Columbus Diaries. Columbus, who's Columbus? Does anybody know? I think there are some romanticized movies about him. After reading the diaries, I'm very grounded, yeah, so I don't think too highly of him. But does anybody know who Columbus was?
Yeah, isn't he the
Yeah.
explorer? What did he discover? I think
America?
yeah, he's the
America.
one that discovered America.
New continent.
America. Yes, and does anybody know the intent? What was the plan? I mean, I like to swear that everybody kind of agrees on discovering America. But does anybody know what the plan was with his diary, with his journey?
I think the initial plan for him is to find another way to the Asia.
Super. Yeah, that was exactly it. A shorter way to India and as well Asia. So what's now kind of India, Bangladesh, and as well kind of around the corner. So he was after kind of different products and merchandise, yeah, and he wanted to show a new shipping route. So those were as well kind of on maps. Actually, still as a case, yeah. So shipping routes are shipping route. So they're kind of roads on the water that are mapped out and are used for navigation. Yeah, and there's a good reason for it. Yeah, so you know you don't have surprising reefs popping up, or you know you have missed somewhere mapping something out and go on a reef and sink your ship. So that's of course the danger that comes with it. But if you read into Columbus Diaries, so it's free online, and I put it on the link, you will see that there's first the pitch. So he actually makes a case that he can deliver this, and this was on secondary. So he claimed he knew this, but this was actually secondary knowledge. And okay, then he eventually gets his boats and starts sailing, and he gets Russians. Does anybody know for how long? How long did he say it would take to sail? Okay, so he claimed something like 2 to 3 months. And that was, I think, undercutting the journey time by something like a quarter. Well, it was basically a quarter to normal travel time. But the interesting part was he got the Russians for that time. And the team, the crew, was recruited for that time. So they were all kind of contractors and working in teams, yeah, on those ships. And if you look at the diaries, you will recognize how somebody has used the different tools to actually drive this crew into a lot longer project than what they signed up for. So the story goes a little bit like that. So after 2 weeks, he noticed that in the crews, there are disbeliefs being expressed about the rightness of this trip. And even one of the crew members that was experienced, I think it's actually the priest that was able to read the star maps that they used for navigation. He pointed out that they actually hadn't made the headway. The stars were still at the same points, which meant that their assumption of progress was a lot less than what they were actually looking for. And that poor fellow went basically overboard and drowned on the day afterwards. 2 days later, I think they had from the crews that based on the Russians, they had been sailing, I think now the 3rd week, and that they still hadn't actually found any islands that they were expecting to pass. So at that point, they actually started changing without the crew knowing the Russians so that the barrels couldn't be used as a time indicator anymore to kind of see how long they had actually sailed. Yeah, so that they changed the unit for that to actually give a impression of less days having passed than actually did. And that was quite easy because most people were as well kind of dehydrated because they were not drinking a lot of water or wasn't the freshest water in the first place. Actually, it's worse. They put even some starch in the water, which yeah, anyway. So in the diaries, this is actually quite detailed. Now in week 3, he changes actually the star maps. So they manually use the maps, copied them, and made a map that was basically aligning to their observations to communicate the anticipated progress to the crew. Yeah, and it goes on like that. Actually, they had as well 2 mutinies, and they dealt with that quite harshly. And if you look at that journey, you will see artifacts, and so what we nowadays have as project management plan, and how to steer as well kind of commitment and the budget. Yeah, so this is an important part in his diaries. It's actually one of the biggest learning articles you can use for management, because it shows you with how the phronesis or how the knowledge of those objects can be used to manipulate. But I have to admit, when you read the diaries and afterwards, I had difficulties in celebrating Columbus for what has been accredited to his goals. Yeah, so I would certainly not want to be friends with him. This is all I'm saying. So he has a picture of people that is on the dark side, very utility driven. Yeah, but so my point is, if you want to see kind of the dark side of phronesis of how to run a project, then that is probably one of the best diaries. Now, I leave it there with the story because I recognize as well that I have run a little bit over time already. So catching up on that, I leave that to you as a homework. If you want, you can use that as well for analysis. So that this may be as well another option to actually analyze how knowledge is managed, how knowledge leakage is kind of addressed. A wonderful case study for that. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, if you want, should I do this quickly? No. Okay. I pop it properly on our Moodle webpage that you can go through it. It's really a diary, so you have to kind of scan read through it. But basically, after week 2, you get very quickly a feeling of the different knowledge objects that they use. They were as well a fleet of ships, so there were as well other people that had similar instruments. So it was about alignment and steering kind of the message on the ships together. Yeah. So, but this is actually documented in the diary. So it's quite an interesting document, probably more honest, ironically, than most of our lessons learned documents and projects. So that is maybe a sad observation. Yeah, but okay, I'll leave it with that. Do you have any questions to that little discourse on the dark side of knowledge objects and how this can take your project? Okay, so what were the key themes here? If you would summarize that, what did I describe here? So why is that an incredible case? Yeah, Ruff, you were tempted, but not impressed. so once again, yeah, so with looking at the knowledge management of the objects in our organization, you get another layer of control and if you want, in Ben Fluenberg's terms, the phronesis of knowledge, right? The values. And of course, once we have that, we can steer that as well. And this is already common practice. Yeah, so this is not a new discovery, but it's probably in a less conscious way. So I think in companies, this is often inherited. Yeah, that the previous project manager shows you how to use a project management plan, you know, to, I don't know, get the subcontractor to work a little bit faster, despite them having contractually more time. Yeah, so, and that those are basically the practices that are in the phronous sphere. Yeah, or if you're interested in that literature, this is as well renowned as a cabin talk. Yeah, so in sports teams, this is often associated with how you frame, motivate, or kind of fire your team up to do things that they may otherwise, or that is just on the level of high performing teams, you know, that brings them a step further to succeeding where they otherwise wouldn't have succeeded. Yeah. Okay, now that was quite a heavy start. So next I have, I think, the case study from NASA. So I think for now we will just, shall we take, where are we time-wise? 28. Let's take a break. Shall we do 45 minutes? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, so 45 minutes, which means that we are back here 1:15.
Yeah.
Okay, super. I stop sharing. And I stop recording.
Did you say 1:15